Welcome to the Breakfast Leadership Show, where we interview global thought leaders on business, leadership, and life. Here's your host, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and chief burnout officer of the Breakfast Leadership Network, Michael Levitt.
Welcome back. I've got Jonathan Brabrand on the line. Jonathan, how are you?
Doing great. Thank you. How are you?
I am awesome. Really looking forward to this conversation. As we were talking about in the pre-show a bit, this is something that I really encourage entrepreneurs to think about when they're launching their business is, what you talk about. So for those that aren't aware of who you are, why don't you share a little bit about you and we'll dive into this conversation.
Absolutely. I'm Jonathan Brabrand, a managing director at Transact Capital. We're an investment bank in Richmond, Virginia. And I've been in the M&A world, mergers and acquisitions, for over 25 years now, basically helping business owners exit their business, plan for that exit, and then actually execute that exit when the time is right. And so it's a passion of mine to work with entrepreneurs and business owners to make sure that they're really capturing the value that they've created over the length of their ownership and make sure they have a great exit at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's really important because entrepreneurs, they have this great idea of a service or a product and they launch it and they put all the time and effort and money and everything else into it and they get it up and running, and sometimes it's okay, we got to grab this and kind of put it together, kind of like if we have a bunch of spare Legos, it's like you put it together, okay, here's our business, and you kind of look at it and you go, yeah, I guess that would work, but there's some processes that could probably be a little bit better here, and documentation and all of that. So it's so important, and because you've been in the field for so long, and I'm sure you've seen pretty much everything when it comes to the state of a particular business when they're looking to be acquired or potentially merge. I'm guessing, what do you think the biggest reasons are why people either delay doing this important work or they don't even think about it? What's some of the reasons from your observation?
I find business owners, a couple of answers there. One is business owners often have a lot of their personal identity tied up in their position of owning a business. And it can be really scary, frightening for them to think about what would I be like? What would my identity be like if I didn't own this business? And so it causes them in many cases to kind of have a paralysis around thinking about exit options and the opportunities that might come along because they really can't envision what life would be like if they weren't a business owner. And so one of the things I talk with them about is the concept of an exit really being a new chapter for three different entities. It's a new chapter for that business owner and their family. Often it involves a fair bit of liquidity and thinking about what would they do, what would that mean for their family, and what would they do philanthropically or in leisure or other pursuits that they might want to follow with that type of liquidity. But it also creates a new chapter for their employees and for the company itself, and allows both of those to have new opportunities, kind of a new life under new ownership that opens up new opportunities for them. And so sometimes holding onto a business too long can not only be detrimental to the business owner themselves, but also to its employees and the company itself. So encourage them to think about, this is not just about you, it's a bigger thing, and that there is a lot of exciting pursuits that a former business owner can follow after selling their business.
We hear a lot of successful cases where people have had several successful exits, which means they've launched a business, rose it, it was acquired, they sold it. What'd they do? They went out and started another business. So that's Correct. Something that, some people could consider if there's something that you want to do, because a lot of times businesses, they'll say, you know what, I'd like to do this too, but it doesn't really align with what this business is. It's like, well, there's nothing holding you back other than money and time,
Right.
Those are no big things.
Right.
But if you were to sell this business, and if you're more passionate about doing that, then do it. Or, even, some people say, I just want to volunteer my time and drive a bus for a retirement home. Awesome. Great. Then you can do that. But, you could also do some fractional work then if you wanted to. And there's all kinds of different options that are available for people. But going back to what you said earlier, it's common, and you see that with a lot of people, especially if they've been in their business for a very long time, that identity. And it's like, okay. And that's why I think a lot of people struggle with retirement. They don't really do the mental work on, okay, I am no longer working, quote unquote, but you're still living, you're still you. But and you see that dynamic. So, I interviewed somebody several years ago, a financial planner, and his thing was advising people, you need to practice retirement. So save up money to at least try to take off. If you can take off 2 or 3 months from work, the longer the better. But literally, save up the money that what you would be bringing in retirement, and you're going to live off of that for however long. Do it because it's, everybody thinks, well, okay, budgeting and this and this. It's like the money thing is not as big as you think. I mean, it's huge, of course.
Right.
It's okay, I've been going and going and going, and now I'm not. And they watch daytime television, and their IQ points just start dropping. And work. That's why I work remotely. I work from home. The television is off. I do not turn it on because my IQ will do this. It's if I need some education, I'll go to this is, I think, the third time today I've said this. I'll go to YouTube University and I'll learn something, or else. It's just there's options there to be creative, and then you mentor people. There's so many different things. So when people are getting ready to retire or plan on selling their business, then it's not yes, it's, I guess, if you want, I don't want to use the word loss. It's a change. It's a different season. It's a new chapter, and like you said, and I think that's a really great way to look at it. So, next question is, as far as the book, obviously, because you've been doing this work for so long, you wrote, a book specifically on this subject. And, obviously I guess the answer to the question is, a lot of people have been asking for you to summarize all this stuff together, but, what inspired you to write the book about this?
Yeah, so I wrote the $100 million exit about a couple years ago. And the main reason I wrote the book was I kept running into entrepreneurs who fell into two different camps, two different ends of the spectrum when it came to their philosophy and their thinking about an exit. On one hand, I had business owners who thought, an exit, a sale of my business is probably a little bit harder than selling a piece of real estate. And so it's really not going to be that difficult. I'll deal with it when the time comes, but maybe it'll take a few months. I'll set that aside because it's probably not going to be that big of a deal. On the other end of the spectrum, I found entrepreneurs who found the concept of selling a business and the thought of it so overwhelming and so difficult, such a black box that they didn't understand, that it also kept them from really engaging with the concept and preparing well for an exit, because it just felt so overwhelming. And every time they tried to wade into it, they got lost, they got overwhelmed, and they stepped back. And the reality is that neither of those are true. The truth lies in between. It's not super difficult, and particularly if you have some preparation and you have a good advisor with you. But it's not super easy either. It does take some work and some planning and some preparation. And so the goal of the book was to help kind of open up the curtain a little bit about what the M&A process looks like, help both ends of that spectrum get a better feel for what to expect. And a full third of the book is dedicated to things business owners can do well before they're ready to exit. That's things that are good for their business, good to help make their business more attractive when the time comes, but can be implemented years before an exit. The middle third is about getting ready for the actual sale process. And the back third are some lessons when you're actually in a sale process what are some of the key takeaways? And the overall underlying concept of the book was for me to take lessons from large transactions that I've been involved with that I've interviewed people have been involved with, pick out the things that made them particularly successful, and then relate them in a way that could be applicable to business owners of any size. And so there are anecdotes and lessons learned throughout the book from $100, $200, $300 million sales that a $10 million in revenue business owner could apply to help make their business more attractive and more saleable.
Well, it's important to know that. And, everybody, again, I'm sure this happens a couple times. People think, well, my business is worth more than that. It's like, no, this is the math. This is how it lines up. This is your revenue. Here's your profits. Here's what the trends have been. This is the state of the industry, the market that you're in, who your demographic is, who you're serving. Is this acquiring organization or entity going, to continue that, or are they going to morph it into something else that they're doing? Is there a component that you need? Or like in my situation, maybe somebody loves the name Breakfast Leadership. Okay. Because, we said, in the pre-show, I have that trademarked. So, there's, I'm not saying there's a ton of value on that, but obviously there's an element to it. So if someone wants it, then there's that to it. But again, it boils down to, what do you have? What can that organization take forward without you? And I think, again, because if you are the business, like in my situation, I'm a keynote speaker is one of the things that I do. Well, somebody else can go do those talks and give presentations if they so feel the need to get up on stage and talk. But they may be one of the majority of people that absolutely would rather die than do public speaking. And there's like, how do you do that? And it's like long story. It involves chicken pox at 21. So that's how it. Long story about that. But ultimately, there's other things that the business does. That creates content, and there's things like that, which of course other agencies could pick up on and get the legacy stuff and move it forward and all that, and there's, obviously other things I haven't even thought about. When I get through the book, then I'll go, oh, maybe that too. Or this book, I'm sure will also potentially inspire some entrepreneurs if there's an element of their business that they're not doing something that's around a marketable service or product that they could do. Obviously that could make a humongous difference in the acquisition price of their business going forward.
Absolutely. No, you touched on a couple of great points there about valuation. One is the basic concept that a business valuation is both art and science. The science part of it comes from really two components, an expected future cash flow stream and the risk associated with that cash flow stream. And so to your point, we can have two businesses with the exact same cash flow stream, but if one is seen as less risky than the other, then the less risky one's going to be more valuable, even though they have the exact same projected cash flow stream. And so doing things in your business, not only to grow the cash flow, which is what most people think about, but also reducing risk will inherently increase the value of your business to a potential buyer. And so, diversification, as you referenced, going into adjacent lines of business that provide diversification of end markets, of customers, of suppliers. These are all, recurring revenue is often talked about as being very valuable. It's because it's seen as less risky. And so the ability to de-risk your business is a second lever in addition to just growing the magnitude of the cash flows that can increase value for sure. The second part is the art side of it. And that is, you alluded to as well. And that is 2 buyers or 10 buyers or 100 buyers. When we contact potential buyers for a transaction, we're contacting a large group, and we'll get valuation feedback on the same company from a variety of different types of buyers. That's all over the map. There's some that see it as very low value, not that exciting, not that compelling. There are many in the middle that, and they're kind of looking for a bargain. There are many in the middle that sort of run the same valuation models, come up with similar valuations, and that's that science aspect of it. But there are a few at hopefully in successful processes that far exceed that traditional valuation kind of peak of the bell curve, because this business represents something special and unique to them. They're building a puzzle, they're creating something, and this is a piece that's really valuable to them. And they see more value in this, acquiring your business in this example, than the run-of-the-mill investor or a more generic strategic acquirer. So part of the art of the business is how you present the business to the market in terms of its capabilities and its options of growth. Finding those buyers for which this business is particularly well suited and they really have to have it, and then creating an auction amongst those few that really have to have it to drive that value to its peak. And so there is definitely an art and a science, and it's not an easy, this business is worth this amount of money. It's sort of a detailed process that involves a lot of work, a lot of preparation, and hopefully a pretty successful outcome at the end of the day.
Yeah, the key thing too is, and we see it a lot, in the news where, larger organizations, publicly traded, will acquire a small business for, small independent business. And the first thing that came to mind, which is way old, was when Microsoft bought Hotmail. A bazillion years ago. Hotmail everybody was using it at the time, and then Microsoft bought it and paid a lot of money. So the founders were set. And so it's a situation because Microsoft wanted a better email client at that point, and this was obviously before Outlook. Or let me do the math here. Now that was around Outlook. If I used to work in tech, so it was around that. But anyway, they wanted something that was web based at that time, and yes, could they have built it? Of course, but you could buy something that's pretty much pre-assembled and modify it over time to fit your needs. That's why a lot of organizations will say, we're willing to pay more for this because it solves a problem. It cuts down on our R&D cost, and we can do it and amortize and do all kinds of fun accounting stuff and be able to, get further along quicker. Because, people like to buy time if they can.
Yes.
And that's, again, another element to consider. If you've got something, product or service that is different than, what your competition per se is doing, but that it would be a benefit to them, it might behoove a conversation if you are open to a collaboration, or maybe you're looking to consider an exit. If there's the right dollar amounts there, there's all kinds of components, and I love the analogy of art and science because it definitely is. Because it's what you have, what they're looking for, and massaging it in such a way where it snaps, and that way it makes such a big difference.
Absolutely. No, one of the things I talk about in the book early on that I encourage business owners to do is to establish industry relationships, is what I call it. But it's essentially making yourself aware to potential buyers that you're out there, that you exist, that you are growing, and not that you are sharing confidential information. It's really not about that at all. It's stuff that they could find on your website. But it's more just making those early connections before you need anything of them, before you're asking them to evaluate your business or would they be interested in investing. It's really just sort of starting to plant the seeds so that they know you're out there, they know what you're doing, and they can be thinking about, man, if that business ever came to market, or if that, I love what they're doing, I'm going to keep an eye on that business. And as it grows, that might be something we might want to snap up in the time to come. And so that's something that I've seen be executed really, really successfully, so that when the time does come to exit, you've got a number of buyers that are champing at the bit and ready to engage because they've been kind of monitoring your progress over the years. So that's something that we've seen be really, 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 really valuable.
Yes. In closing, there's obviously more than one thing, but if an entrepreneur could do one thing to make your job easier as an M&A expert, and someone's to help it out, what would that be?
It really is have a plan to, and you alluded to this earlier, have a plan to be working your way out of the business. If stepping back from the business is part of your goal for an exit. Now, there are some entrepreneurs, and we talk about it in the book, that take on investors, private equity, and don't plan to step away from their business. And they use that growth capital to really fuel growth well beyond what they might be able to do with their own finances. And so that's a little bit less of a applicable situation. But most business owners that we deal with are looking for an exit transaction as a way to step back from the business over a period of time. And the more ingrained they are in the business, the more difficult that will be. On one extreme, if the business revolves around the business owner, you have a job, but a job isn't sellable. A job ends when you decide to stop working. And there are great jobs that make people a lot of money, but they aren't creating intrinsic value in a business, in an ongoing entity. And so those just kind of softly end when those people decide to not do that job anymore. On the end of the spectrum, though, are businesses that have been built that can continue and have a life of their own. And the business owner maybe was very, very vital to the business at one point, has found a way to slowly step away from it, has built a team around him or her, has some plans for succession. And those succession plans may not have been implemented yet, which is fine. It's more that we're on a trajectory towards a succession and a stepping back of the business. That I think is, and it goes to processes and procedures, which you alluded to earlier. And it just goes to the fact that, is this something that can be sustainable without this person over the long term? And if the answer is yes, then you've created something that, in addition to providing cash flow while you're doing it, has value to be monetized at the end.
Love this conversation, Jonathan. Where can people find out more about you and this amazing work you're doing?
Thank you, Jonathan. www.jonathanbrabrand.com, or my firm is Transact Capital in Richmond, Virginia.
Awesome. I'll definitely have that in the show notes. So, Jonathan, thank you so much for writing this amazing book and the amazing work you're doing. You're helping a lot of people achieve their dreams. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Breakfast Leadership Show, part of the Breakfast Leadership Network. Visit breakfastleadership.com for tips on empowering your business and your life.